What I want to talk to you about today, because when Dave and Kevin, they asked me to present, I'm like, I'm not a designer. Are you crazy? I have nothing to share with anyone. And they said, we just want you to talk about what you're passionate about. So I'm not necessarily going to talk about social media, but I am going to talk about a way in which I use social media to do something that I think is pretty darn cool. And it's called Crisis Overnight. And just to set the stage for you, Gretchen, if you wave, who's the executive director of the Elgin Area Community Crisis Center, a friend of ours put us in touch together, and she said, I heard you do some stuff with computers. And I said, well, yeah, I do. And she said, we're in need right now. State funding is gone. Our cash on hand is gone. The crisis center is going to close in 3 weeks without the funding that we need. And we don't know what else to do. Is there something you can do to help? And she had suggested an idea that they had done maybe a year or two ago where they invited a reporter to come in and stay overnight and document the experience. And I said, without getting too weird on you, what if I come stay overnight there and I donate my online presence to the crisis center for 12 hours and maybe see what can happen? I said, how much do you need to raise? And she said, $150,000. I was like, okay, let's try this and see what happens. So I was getting ready to leave that next day to go out to New York to speak at a conference. We had 1 week to put this together. So Gretchen and I met, we strategized, and I went to work that very evening. So the design of Crisis Overnight, just at its very basic elements. We came up with what I believe is very strong messaging. It had to launch from there, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But the messaging was, we raise the money and their doors stay open. We don't, and they close. I was going to donate my entire online presence, and for the concept that we were developing, it really worked best with Twitter, Facebook, my video presence, and my blog. I talked to Gretchen and the team about the concept of crowdsourcing, reaching a large group of people who can give a small amount in order to do something great. It also depended, we've talked several times amongst us that it took all the right people at the right time coming together. If one piece didn't fit, it was not going to work. And Smata Mason, they're like the angels that I met. They came in and they're like, what are you working on? Oh, we'll put the website together for you guys and get it up and running. I also think what worked is that it was all heartfelt and real. There wasn't any scripting, there wasn't any staging. I went there to just experience what it was like to spend a night at a crisis center. This is just an excerpt from one of my blogs. One of the things, Valentine, I actually met with her and I said, what are all the messages you've never been able to get out that you wish you could about domestic violence or economic issues? And she gave me like 15 binders that stacked up really high, and I was like, can you narrow some of that down? So she gave me a few of the most important pieces, and throughout the night I posted them on my blog. So if nothing else, we were getting some messages out there and people were reading. And I know people were reading because they were commenting or they were contacting me privately. This is a true story. So that night, people were just pouring in at the crisis center giving money. And one of the workers there looked over, I heard her whisper, she goes, it's just like It's a Wonderful Life when everyone helps George Bailey. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, I remember I just got chills, and I was like, oh my God, we're doing that. And I just kept thinking, like, I can't believe this is happening, because people could donate online. We did this whole crowdsourcing thing, and I put as kind of like a caveat or a sub-bullet point, if you live in the area, feel free to stop by. And people kept coming. We had to cut off the donation hours that night, and people were donating from all over the United States and Canada and coming in. We made $30,000 in the first 12 hours. And I think it was around 3 a.m. when Valentine went home, and I was like, I'm going to pass out. So, but I kind of got a little sad at first. I thought, I had these ideas of grandeur where I was like, we're going to make the $150,000 before I go to bed, and it's going to happen. So I was a little bit down, I'll be honest, when we had that $30,000 mark, but I never gave up. Even the next day when I got some sleep, I woke back up, and the donations had crawled a little. I thought, this was all supposed to happen for a reason. It just was. I knew we were going to meet our goal. And that next day, people kept on showing up, kept on giving. Teresa would get a call with someone who had a check for $10,000. A local vendor would call and say, we're going to donate all of our proceeds today. There were workers from the crisis center who came and signed over their checks. I mean, things just kept happening. Everybody wanted to be a part of this in some way. And it was all over the United States and in our community. I don't think anyone expected the amount of outreach from people who had nothing to do with the crisis center to come in and donate and just give to something that they didn't truly know what was going to happen. Because even if we secured this $150,000, it wasn't guaranteed that the crisis center was going to be open later in the year if state funding didn't come through. In 3 weeks, the donations didn't stop, and we raised $164,000. And that is so cool. Everyone kept asking me, how did you do that? How did you do that? Can you package it together and give it to me to do? And the answer is no, I don't think you can. I don't think this is something. I think this was it just happened to work this way. And I want to talk quickly about the concept of enormity. If I stood there and said, I want to solve the issues related to domestic violence and homelessness in 24 hours. Are you with me? Let's change the world. Everyone just would have kind of put their heads down and kept on going, and it's only because it's too overwhelming. It's not that we don't want to change the world or want to stop domestic violence, but that's just really overwhelming. So I focused on one specific thing, and the ask was, I need to raise this amount of money to keep the doors open at this crisis center. I went to my in-laws' church a few weeks ago, and the pastor there was teaching the congregation about how do you evangelize, how do you share your faith. And it was an aha moment for me. The lights went on because when he mentioned what those two things were, I realized that was the power of the connection with building an audience on social media and ultimately what worked for us raising that money. And there were two very simple things. Also, people got excited not only about the cause, but the tools. There were some 70-year-old women that came. You remember the woman that came in and she said, because we asked for $10, and she said, here's my $10, and then you opened it up and it was a $100 check. She wasn't on Twitter, but it just became contagious. She was just excited to be part of something big. It created kind of an energy around us that people wanted to participate in. And again, I said at the beginning, clear, concise messaging. I feel like that was so important. If you're on Twitter, I know yesterday we learned about hashtags. The hashtag for this event was Crisis Overnight. So even if someone didn't know what was going on and they saw me kept using that hashtag, it created a sense of urgency with crisis. And we all kind of had that voyeuristic side of us. It's that train wreck. Do I want to see it? Do I not? But people wanted to come see what was going on over in my world. So I was only there for one night, and it has since changed my life. But I have 4 guests with me who are there every single day, living the mission of the Crisis Center and keeping it open. And I have asked them to be my guests today to quickly share with you their experience of Crisis Overnight and what it means to the center now. And here comes the mic. Lisa, Valentine, Gretchen, and Teresa.